Hello and welcome to the Celtic Down Under podcast, the weekend review. My name's Anthony, and I will be sitting in the hosting job for Sean this week since he's away in Scotland. And I'm joined by my regular co-contributor Paul, and also making his guest debut on Celtic Down Under, Richards. How are you, mate?
Very good, mate. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me on. Did you notice I almost had a cat moment going on back there, like somebody kind of small child trying to get through? But yes, no. Thanks very much for inviting me. Great to be along, speaking with like-minded Celtic fans, and hope to add a wee bit of entertaining spin to the weekend's ongoings.
Paul, how are you, mate?
I'm okay. We obviously caught up at the Perth Celtic Supporters Club on Saturday, but then I had to back that up with a bit of a old school boys reunion yesterday, which, as tends to be the case when you don't see old mates for a long time, got slightly out of hand. Not ridiculously so, but certainly a bit much on a Sunday. So work was not my favourite thing first thing, but we got through it, and happy to be back chatting about a very entertaining and pleasing weekend of football.
Yes, absolutely. I've landed myself with a cold, so obviously I was enjoying myself far too much on Saturday night. Not so much at the gym on Sunday morning, I might add, but that's a whole separate story. Obviously, yes, Paul and I did manage to get down to the Celtic Supporters Club in Perth. Absolutely great evening, great turnout. The club's just done some decorating of the top floor there, so it was actually some really good bits of memorabilia, and it was a really good weekend. And the game itself, maybe not so much up until near the end of the match, but it was just sort of like, it was one of those games where it was like just waiting for something to happen, and then it all kind of did with about 10-15 minutes to go. So
it was very entertaining. I've got my niece has just arrived from Scotland. She brought some Scottish plain bread and some square sausage, and so we were warming up for the match by doing square sausage and plain bread sandwiches. Superb. But I have to say, really good game. I thought it was a really competitive game, and I thought that actually Celtic were very patient. That kind of last 10-minute spell, I know the game's now gone for 110 minutes, but that last kind of 10-minute spell, very exciting. Really good game. Motherwell, very compact.
Yeah, no, they definitely were. I suppose the thing for me was that I read the team sheet on my phone and was just like, I totally stepped past the fact that Joe Hart wasn't in goals. So the team was Scott Bain, AJ at right back, Lagerbielke and Stales at centre half, Greg Taylor left back, Cal Mack, Hatate, and Matt O'Reilly, and then we had Yang, Hilger, and Maida across the front three. Paul, any sort of shocks there? Anything that sort of surprised you, or was that sort of kind of what we expected against Motherwell at Fir Park?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing before even we get to the lineup, we've got a really positive start to the day because Hatate and Matt O'Reilly have both signed extensions. So that's a great bit of news and sets everything up positively. For me, the things that were slightly surprising and could have gone either way was starting Lagerbielke when he's suspended for Wednesday. There was obviously a toss up there and a decision to be made. Do we set him aside and put together whatever the partnership was hoping to be on Wednesday? Now I think we got an answer with that with Nat Phillips coming on after 62 minutes.
60 minutes.
Obviously, the plan is get him through that and hope he's good enough to fit enough to play at least from the start on Wednesday. So that sort of makes sense. And then the only other position, like we've talked about this a little bit, the team sort of picks itself at the minute based on form and injuries, but that right wing spot is still kind of up for grabs, right? We could move Maeda over there and have Palmer start on the left, or Yang or Forrest probably are there your options. And Yang got the nod. It could have gone any one of the two other options as well. And obviously, as we probably won't dwell on this, but he didn't really take his chance, did he? He was pretty poor all around and got the hook at halftime with Forrest coming on in his place. And look, he probably didn't probably didn't do much better. He had a gilt-edged chance that he should have tucked away. But yeah, they were the only sort of two things for me. As you say, Bain had to play because we didn't have anyone else. But yeah, it was sort of unexpected beyond that.
Scott Bain did okay though. I mean, he had a couple of not too difficult saves, saved with his feet. But I was interested in, and it did change the game, when Brendan brought off pretty much all of the Japanese contingent in one kind of fell swoop, and that actually altered the balance of the game dramatically. That was the kind of the prelude to those kind of last 10 minutes, actually.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Richard, because when you said that, when they made that change, Paul and I looked at each other and went, "Oof, I don't know if this is going to be the triple change that's going to win us the match." Because you take Kyogo off. I mean, Maeda's work rate is his work rate, and obviously Hatate for David Turnbull. So you're sort of thinking, it's a gutsy call. It's a big call. I mean, obviously, it ended up being the right one. So obviously, you justify that and say that they probably got it right, particularly with Silva sort of scoring that first goal. Just some Palmer. You really keep all season the story going. I tell you what,
you've renamed him.
I've renamed him Silva. Anyway, some stats for you because Sean's not here, and I kind of feel like I'm responsible for shoving some stats out. So, 71% possession to Celtic, 6 shots to 4 on target, 10-3 off target, 6 corners to 4, 11 fouls to 12, and then 3 saves to 4. So, possession aside, it was pretty even. I watched the highlights back today because obviously I wasn't sort of like a few beers deep as I was at the Celtic Club on Saturday night, and the first 5 minutes it was all chances for Motherwell. Like there really wasn't anything for Celtic until a very weak shot from Maeda in the second half. Quick free kick that you pointed at, Richard, that Scott Bain did pull a good save for. And then there was the overhead kick Spittle had that again was off target. And then they had a chance in the second half again where Bain was called into action again. So probably the one thing for me in this particular performance, and again, the only time I've seen it this season is when we drew with St Johnstone at home, was a lot of possession, a lot of build-up, but that final third just lacking that penetrating pass, that little bit of link-up, just not really creating that many chances. Kyogo was, I'm going to say non-existent, but he just wasn't really getting the service. So, Paul, I guess the question is, how do we unpack that? I mean, obviously, we got there in the end, and as Richard rightly said, we were patient. But is that a concern sort of going forward? That sort of just constant sort of, we called it lackluster in the green room before we came on, and you'd have to say it probably was to a point.
Yeah, it was. I think it was mostly just the pace we moved the ball at. Motherwell were really well, as Richard touched on in the opening comments. Motherwell were really well organized. They were well drilled. They sat deep. They had 5 across the back, so there wasn't much room to get sort of beyond them. But the way to do that is shift the ball more quickly. And I think we were just a bit ponderous in possession. The criticisms of Rodgers' teams down the years is that he's sort of ball retention over everything else. And when that's the case, you need a little bit of individual brilliance or a mistake to open that up. The BBC actually had us at 24 shots and 6 on target. Now, I don't feel like it could have been as much as that unless they were just from weak efforts from distance. But one of my kind of criticisms of the performance was we didn't really try too many things, and I really don't see how they got those stats at that kind of level. But even if you're saying that they were at 24, only 6 on target's pretty poor. And yeah, basically it took, I don't know why we give Palmer the benefit of the doubt and say that he was aiming for that far corner, and it's a great finish if so, or he's whipped it in a dangerous area, in which case it's still a great ball in. But the defender sort of hesitates and the goal is a bit unsighted and it sort of nestles in the back of the net. But yeah, Brendan Rodgers said in his after-match comments, we lacked a bit of quality in the final third. And that's his succinct as you can be. That's really what it came down to. And if we don't have that little bit of brilliance or a little bit of extra quality, then teams can sit in deep and probably frustrate us. And that's where you really do miss somebody like Jota, who's got that ability to sort of open things up with a bit of individual brilliance. So, hopefully we see Palmer bring some more of that to the game over time. But he's got a battle on his hands to displace doesn't matter. So we'll see. That's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, we do have some concerns.
Daizen had a decent game. I thought Daizen was probably one of the brighter parts for those kind of 50-60 minutes, but he had a couple of good chances that he probably would normally have done better with, and I think that was, for me, that was surprising actually, that somebody I would usually think of being relatively reliable, a la the Magic Mushroom, doing something that was going to be a bit special, doing something that was a bit out of the ordinary, didn't really happen. I thought some of the treatment to Greg Taylor meted out was a wee bit kind of fruity at times. I think at one point, I recall texting you during the game, Anthony, saying I think that's his fibula gone, because it was just such a rough tackle. The VAR room clearly didn't get involved, but actually, my opinion would be that was a close to one of our orange cards, not quite a yellow, not quite a red, but an orange card. We won't draw too much from that, but I do think that it was so interesting from the point of view of Palmer, and then Celtic seemed to switch off. To me, but it was almost as if the game was won. The game's now gone for 110 minutes, and I'd be interested in what you guys think. There was a really long lag between the kind of goal and then Motherwell and those kind of waves of attacks, and I actually think that Celtic switched off midfield and defensively.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, Richard. Firstly, I'll take you up on your refereeing. So obviously, Rio Tati got a kick to the face in the first half, and he was down for quite a while. So there's obviously a bit of concern there that, was he concussed, or was it just a cut to the lip? And thankfully, he was able to continue. So that was a yellow card there. The tackle on Greg Taylor was pretty meaty, and yeah, like you say, you could make a case for a red card there. Obviously, there wasn't much time left in the game at that point, but still, with Europe on Wednesday, you would not want to be losing Greg Taylor at this point in time. And yeah, even the remonstrating from like Kettlewell, like with Atati being down, it's like it's a head injury. Like you got to let these things play out and sort themselves out. Like he's like, "Oh, we want to keep playing." It's like, well, it is what it is. So, apart from that, I mean, I don't think there was too many sort of refereeing calls there. They were probably the two sort of things that stick in my mind during the match. I guess the other one was the chalked off goal that Motherwell had. Obviously, it ended up being offside, and that was confirmed by VAR. But it was interesting because we obviously were in the Celtic club, and the audio wasn't great, and we were sort of wondering whether it was blown up as a free kick or not, because obviously the centre forward has sort of barged into Bain, and it's one of those ones where probably enough contact for a free kick, because goalkeepers are a protected species, but you wouldn't maybe want to be relying on it. It was the fact that it was offside was just, yeah, okay, that's fine, move on. But I just feel that had Motherwell gone 1-0 up at that point, they might have been quite hard to pry a result out of that match, because they were pretty determined at the back to not let us in.
VAR is a mystical world of Clydesdale House, as I saw watching the second half at Rangers.
It depends what team's playing, I guess. But I guess the one thing with Mother was the long throw. I mean, that's in that what catches us out for the goal. And there was a couple in the first half where they managed to get one across, and that's where the overhead kick came from. So I felt probably, we definitely needed to have dealt with that better. And I think for me, Paul, I'll get your take on this in a second, but I think David Turnbull was the one that was daydreaming on the edge of the box, didn't track the runner, didn't put enough pressure on Spittle. And then that allowed the 1-2, and then that allowed him to sort of have the shot and didn't really give Bain much chance to save it. So I kind of feel that there was, and that was also part of Brendan Rodgers' post-match was he was disappointed to lose that goal. And I just kind of feel that a bit more intensity around the edge of the box, that wouldn't have happened. But that's my take. Paul, what's yours?
Yeah, so I'll take a step back and I'll mention the disallowed goal again in a little bit. We touched on it, just like you said, and I don't think he was going to give the foul. And there was definitely enough contact with that leading arm across the front of him, but it doesn't look like he was going to give it. Eventually showed a VAR the first offside. Even if that's not offside, he's offside because he kicks it right on the goal line, and he's on the goal line, and it hits him before it gets bundled over. So he's offside twice, and there's probably a free kick. So I don't think there could be too many complaints about that one getting ruled out. Their goal, absolutely, it's bad defending, and you're right. Brendan Rodgers said we should have defended more aggressively, and it was disappointing to lose that goal. And yeah, we switched off slack. I think we give away a reasonably cheap corner. You're right, Turnbull is culpable, but so is Scales. Scales' clearing header is pretty shocking. It's just a loopy effort to the edge of the box. Spittle's got time to sort of bring that down. You're right, Turnbull's his man. He doesn't press him. In fact, he allows him to play it in and then jog past him, and he's still standing watching. Then Scales is ponderous getting out to him, because at that point he's run into his space. That's now his man. He doesn't get to him. Ball comes back to him, and it's a good finish. He tucks it away nicely. But if you are Brendan Rodgers, you're pulling your hair out. We've worked really hard to get a lead in a game which is on a knife edge, and then a couple of bits of really sloppy play by two players give them a lifeline. And look, the only saving grace out of that mess was that their celebrations meant that there was a bit more time had to be added on. Which became a talking point, definitely with the other side in that, we played 97 or 98 minutes when there was only 5 on the board. But between Taylor's injury and their celebrations, there's easily those extra minutes. So I don't think there's any controversy there either. And the officials, whilst, they probably didn't get some of the decisions quite right around some of the heavy-handed roughhouse tactics by Motherwell, at least they got that right. And that is one of the things with that new rule where it really comes into benefit. If there are extra minutes to be played, then you typically get them. And obviously we kept going and got an absolute screamer to win it.
Richard, what was your take on the winning goal? Well, not what we thought the winning goal was, but the actual winning goal.
Great cross by Greg Taylor, wonderful finish, and nice to see them celebrating with the fans in a sort of semi-organized fashion. It looks like the stewards were clearly anticipating that we were going to score, and they were already prepared, so that was entertaining. But no, lovely finish. Matt O'Reilly, what a great week for him. He's also got a sensible deal, which is going to keep him with the club for a reasonable length of time. But a wonderful way to celebrate it. Yeah, fabulous moment. Really exciting 10 minutes of football.
I know, it was kind of like, it was just building up to something. And I'd say to Paul, something's going to happen here. I felt we were sort of just applying the right amount of pressure just to maybe create a chance. And it ended up being, it came, and then it was like, and then it went, and then it came again. And it was just, and that's not even Matt O'Reilly's preferred foot. I mean, he's left-footed, and he's smashed that in on the volley on his right foot. So, I mean, fair play. And again, he got special mention from Brendan in the post-match interviews. So I think you're absolutely right, Richard. I think, he's had a big week, and he's managed to cap it off. And that's they're the sort of players you want at Celtic, because I mean that's a winning mentality, and it just, I'm sure the follow message boards were lighting up. Well, they were, because we saw the comments on Sunday. But when Motherwell went one each, and the celebrations at getting an equaliser, it was just incredible. Almost as incredible, but then at the same time, we've got a track record of doing it. It's almost in our DNA that we find a way, and it's happened last season, it happened season before that, those last minute winners. And as Paul said, on Saturday night, I remember, I don't know, that may be us, but they are the games that win leagues, and they do. Paul, this mentality that we have for finding a way in these situations, I mean, how do you explain it? How does it happen?
Well, Brendan actually, again, he commented that in his post-match comments. He said it basically, this club's built on those late finishes and going right to the death and playing to the end and beyond. And yeah, you're right that, that you mentioned a few of the that over the last few years, but I remember like one of my earliest, my second or probably my earliest, the earliest season I fully remember is the centenary season, 87, 88. And that season was full of those kind of moments, especially in the Scottish Cup, where obviously we won the double in a centenary year. We become used to trebles, but even doubles were a rare thing, especially in the late 80s and most of the 90s, like hen's teeth. And that year in the cup run, there was 2 late goals in the semi-final against Hearts, and there was 2 late goals in the final against United. So you remember that right down the years, and I'm sure there was some people even older than us will remember ones from the 70s and 60s as well, I'm sure. But yeah, I think there's just that expectation level, right? We can't it's unacceptable for Celtic to lose matches. So the managers as the sort of custodians know they've got to produce teams that do that and drill that into players. And the players, in fairness to them, and sort of Richard alluded to earlier in the show, they did just keep going. Their heads never went down. Interestingly, in that goal, Nat Phillips is again the guy that's quite far up the pitch that feeds Taylor. There's no pressure on Taylor, but what a ball. It's an absolute screamer of a cross. And O'Reilly's done it again. He times his run absolutely perfectly. And as you say, meets it on his weaker foot, but it's a really controlled volley. And that's where about the control stopped, because everybody went absolutely bloody mental after it. But as did we in the pub. But yeah, like, as you say, definitely those results sicken your opposition and they galvanize you as a team, and they are the type of matches that win leagues when you turn 1 point into 3.
It's I guess it does put pressure on the other side of town. And last season, for whatever reason, we always seem to play on the Sunday after they'd played on the Saturday. So it's interesting. Well, obviously with the Champions League this year, we've maybe got a few more games ahead of them. And that
I thought you were talking about St Mirren.
Well, they only managed a 1-1 draw against Kilmarnock away, so that was a bit of a wee slight slip up by St Mirren. So I mean, fair play, Richard. We'll get there. But is that Richard? Do you think that is a psychological thing? Do you think winning first and then putting the pressure on to that mob over on the east side of
No. Actually, on this occasion, I don't, and I think that they have created their own internal alchemy, which we don't need to get into that. But it's great. Do you know what? I was really happy about this weekend because I was fairly comfortable about Brendan coming back. He's a good manager, he's a great coach. He did a great job with us before. It's not Ange Ball, and I think that a lot of us have looked at that and gone, "Oh, it's not Ange Ball." But it's effective and it's quality football, and I think it's moving in the right direction. So I don't worry about it. It's almost kind of the same mentality as I'm sure they have in the dressing room. Let's not worry about what's going on over there. They've got their own problems, their own things to think about. I'm interested in Celtic. I want us to do well. I think that actually it's really lovely to watch what is being achieved, and it was really lovely to watch. It's a relentlessness that we've both spoken about. Ange talked about we never stop. But we didn't stop before then, and I think that's really lovely to see again. Like Brendan's kind of going, right, yeah, this is what we're about. But he knows, he feels it, and he's one of us. So I'm really enjoying the fact that we're playing at the level that we're playing at. Yeah, of course, it can be better. There's some misses that Paul alluded to the fact that Jota's gone. Yes, he was a bit like you will recall in the era of Larson, Lubo, Moravcik, the people who can unpick locks. So we don't necessarily have that at the moment, but it's moving in the right direction. The speed will come. I think we're looking fairly comfortable at the moment in Scotland. And yeah, let's not talk too much about Rangers. I mean, they've clearly got their own problems, but St Mirren, that's the big threat at the moment. They're in second place. They haven't played us and they haven't played Rangers.
Yes, well, actually, they are playing Rangers at home on Saturday or Sunday. Well, this weekend coming anyway, so that will be a very, very interesting tie, and we'll touch on the Huns in a few minutes. Paul, was there any players that you wanted to focus on this week as part of a...
Yeah, well, I think nobody covered themselves in a huge amount of glory for good chunks of the game, but Richard was right to mention Bain. They were reasonably routine saves. You would expect a goalkeeper to save them, but you still got to save them, right? And you know, it's remiss of me and probably the majority of us that are willing to sort of stick your head up on either these type of things or even just on social media who have used the phrase "I've got the massive fear" with Scott Bain. So it's only fair that we all hold our hands up and say he did a decent job. You know, he couldn't do anything about the goal, as we've covered. He was only asked to make 2 sort of decent saves, and he made them. The defense looked relatively stable. I do think we're susceptible to the ball over the top, particularly on Scales' side. I think with the ball in front of him, he looks pretty solid. His distribution's pretty decent. He's good in the tackle. His timing in the tackle's pretty good. But as soon as he's asked to turn with a ball over the top, he looks like he's all over the place. He's all at sea at that point. So that is a concern, particularly obviously going up a level or 2 on Wednesday. But yeah, look, it's I would say the other players that we touched on, Greg Taylor, he took a heavy one. Hopefully he's fit for Wednesday, because after, you know, a pretty shocking start to the season, that's now 2 or 3 games where he started particularly to put a bit of form together. And it's no surprise that sort of coincided with him being much more inverted and being allowed to play that. He's basically a converted midfielder, right? That was where he came from. As a young player, he played in midfield by all accounts. So you can see he's really comfortable stepping into the midfield and moving the ball around that way. The cross for the goals, like I said, it's just absolutely perfect. And yeah, a couple of good games under his belt is really what he needs, because as we know, a bit of a confidence game. You can be a really good player, but if your confidence dips, then you know it takes a bit to try and find some form. So it's good timing that he has. To Richard's points, yes, we're gradually sort of building up a bit of momentum. We've still got some adversity in that you know, we've got players missing, and we are a bit stretched, and people are being asked to step in and do jobs where they probably wouldn't have been expected to play as big a part this early in their Celtic careers, but they're doing a decent job in the circumstances. And the last player I wanted to mention was Matt O'Reilly. Again, we weren't great all day, but he's just the form. We touched on it before. He's a form player of the season, and he probably our best performer again, without giving too much away on later.
It reminds me of Tommy Rogic in terms of his nonchalance. You know, he can have a really, really good game and put something away and contribute enormously, and it just looks like he's just out for a wee walk in the park. That's the thing I admire him most. He's 21 years old. He's an astounding talent.
Absolutely.
He's got that lanky stride that Rogic has sort of got. So he's sort of got the build, and now he's starting to add goals to his game. And I'll keep harping on about this, because that was the criticism last season. It took him pretty much 3/4 of the season to score his first goal in the campaign. So this year he started like a house on fire in terms of goal scoring. So I mean, he's going to be right up there if he can keep that form going. And it's just it's very exciting to see. And as I've said to Paul on Saturday night, he really needs to nail on that. He needs to be a stick on for that, you know, that midfield. You know, obviously Cal McGregor is a stick on, but he needs to be a stick on. So it's a competition for the other spot. And he's doing that. I mean, you know, you have to say, as the season's gone on, he's been the sort of standout performer in that midfield 3. And again, just to tie him down, and the fact that the club swatted away a £10 million bid from Leeds in the window, you know, it as much as signing new players is important, and you need a couple of players to leave and a couple of players to come in to regenerate the squad and keep it fresh. It's also important to try and hold on to a bit of talent if you think you can still squeeze more out of them before they move on. And you know, we were talking about it and we're saying, well, he could have went to Leeds and he could have rumbled around there for a couple of seasons in the Championship, got promoted eventually, and take his chances. But you know, if he keeps on the trajectory that he's going, 2 things are going to happen. One, the Danish national team's going to come in and offer him a full cap, and he'll become a full international. And then the second thing is, when he does get an offer from the Premier League, it's going to be on that top half. It's going to be one of the better teams coming in for him, and then that his career can sort of go and kick on from there. But he seems a very sensible lad. He comes across quite smart in interviews and quite thoughtful, and he knows exactly what he's saying when he's saying it. So it's definitely, he's definitely. And again, you forget he is 21 years old. Like as you say, like he doesn't strike yourself. He strikes you as someone as like he's mid-20s, but he's only 21. So big future, and hopefully a few more seasons at Celtic yet. At this point, I will put. Yeah.
So I was just going to say 5 goals in 7 games is an amazing return, and he should have had more, right? We talked about that St. Johnstone game where he had 3 good chances. So even he takes one of those, and we're even further ahead, and he's got 1 or 2 more on his account. But yeah, you're right. It's a mature head on sort of young shoulders, and the only potential weakness I see in him is pace, right? That's probably the only thing. But he's such a good footballer, and with a quick football brain, that he can probably make up for that. And as we said, as well as adding the goals this season, I think we touched on in other shows, he's added that more defensive work rate as well. So he's playing more like a box to box, traditional box to box midfielder, back support and Cal in the holding position, and then obviously getting beyond the strikers and scoring goals. So he's got a really high ceiling, and I just hope that the clubs protect themselves with the contract extension, but there's no way he'll see out that extension, right? He'll be gone. If not at the end of this season, then we might get him for one more, and I'd love to see him for one more season, but he could be gone as quickly as the end of this one. But he'll certainly go for more than he'll certainly go for more than the 10 million thanks to that contract extension and the performances we're seeing.
Yeah, I was going to say, Paul, a good week for the lawyers in Celtic, between Rio Hatate and Matt Riley, and also dreadful, Ralston. Yeah, he got a renewal as well, which was So lots of good business, lots of good business. Well, at the end of time, they're terminating contracts. So yeah.
Brendan did thank the board and said that a lot of work had gone into those extensions as well. So I mean, he does acknowledge that fact. I don't know if I've said that already or not, but so there is acknowledgement there that there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I think the Ralston one, I'm for that. The boy puts 110% on every time he goes on the park. Doesn't leave anything out there, and he's willing to be a squad player. He's willing to be backup. And, but when he's in there, he'll do a job for you. And he's definitely more than good enough at the SPFL level, as far as I'm concerned anyway. The one thing probably I wanted to touch on just from the squad's team perspective at the moment is probably the right wing position, because with Abada being a long-term injury, we're kind of cycling through players in that position at the moment. So Forrest started last week, and obviously the victim of Joe Hart's red card and got hooked after half an hour. And then this week we had Yang for half a game and then Forrest for half a game. And Yang, for me at the moment, it's flattering to see. He looks really good on the ball, but the output just isn't there at the moment. Distribution, shots, just again, he had that one shot, but he sort of dragged it wide, I think, from what he cut in, and it was a bit weak. And then Forrest, that header, it was just crying out for it to go a foot either side, and it was in the back of the net, but he's just stuck it straight down the throat of Liam Kelly. Paul, obviously we've got Lazio on Wednesday night. I think the right wing position is definitely one up for grabs. Is it who do you see slotting in there? Could you maybe see Maeda coming across and playing Palmer on the left? Where do you see it? Because I think that's the one position that's definitely up for grabs at the moment.
You're right. It is that like we expect Nat Phillips, if he's come through that half hour, 40 minutes with the added on time. Okay, you expect him to slot in for Lagerbielke. That's the only change. Joe Hart's back in goals, obviously. I would think Maeda goes, because that's what he did against Feyenoord, right? And Palmer was okay, but he's had a couple more. He's had more minutes in the shirt. He's got 2 really good contributions. These are the goals, obviously. Give him the benefit of doubt or not. It should have been a match winner. if we weren't dozy at the back. And that it was his cross for that James Forrest chance. And you're right, he should have tucked it away. It's probably the right ball landing to pretty much one of the worst people to be in there, because I don't know how many goals James Forrest scored with his head, but it won't be many, if any. Of those 100-odd goals, I'd be surprised if there were many that were headers. So yeah, I think Palmer's probably the shout. And Miera did a good job on the right wing against Feyenoord, as I banged on about lengthily. Should have had a penalty in the second minute, and is with open space behind defenses. He's terrifying. So he'll definitely play. It just depends which side of the pitch he's on. But I agree with you. Yang's not. He's flat to deceive, and I don't think he'll be asked to do a job. I'd probably argue that Forrest's closer to a pick for that match than Yang at the minute, based on the recent contributions. But you're right. There are not many other decisions to be made, I wouldn't have thought.
Lazio got beat 2-0 by Milan, so they're coming into it on the back of getting a bit of a doing. In fact, I believe by all accounts it was a proper doing.
7 points, 7 points in 7 games in Serie A, currently sitting 15th. So not travelling terribly well. They did manage a 1-1 draw against Atletico Madrid in the first round of Champions League fixtures. So capable, but not travelling well, you'd have to say.
Well, and that was an injury time goal by the goalkeeper, wasn't it? To get themselves a draw. So yeah, they got themselves to the mix, but I'm pretty sure it was kind of down to the wire. But yeah, not to be sniffed at. I think Atletico are the best team in the group. So, but it's a really good opportunity for they're in poor form. We've just had a real kind of boost to win a game that we thought we might not. That builds momentum. It builds positivity. So yeah, a home match, full house, under the lights. We've got to get, if we want to get anything out of Europe this season, we've got to win that match.
What do you think, Richard?
Completely agree. I think that when I looked at the group, I thought we're probably 6 points in third place, and this was one of the games that we have to win at home. This one and Feyenoord at home. I think the rest of it pretty much right off. Atletico beating Real Madrid. We know what Real Madrid did to us last season, and I think they're a very, very useful outfit. I think Lazio, listen, we went to Rome and beat Lazio not that long ago, so I'm very optimistic. It's that first 10 minutes at Celtic Park on a European night. Once all the dust settles and you start playing football, staying calm, keeping a hold of the ball. I think Brendan's better at that than most of the coaches of the eras where we would lose a goal in the first 10 minutes against European opposition. And I think we've got some quality. And I think the Japanese guys are great. And I agree with Paul. I think Maeda was the player of the season last season. I know that for a variety of reasons, Kyogo got all the plaudits, but like Maeda, to me, is our class act above all others. And I think that he is the guy who will probably be a key if we're going to win.
What is our score predictions then for Celtic versus Lazio on Wednesday night? How do we see it panning out, Paul?
I'll let Richard go first because he's very much got 2-1.
2-1.
Yeah, and I'm gonna look. Generally, have to try and stay positive. It won't be a straightforward game, but I think I think just a mixture of form and the requirement to win and the home advantage, I take us 2-1 as well.
I would say 3-1 just to be different, but no, it's obviously it's all or nothing. But in an ideal world, it'd be great to have one of your first choice centre halves. I mean, I said that against Feyenoord as well, but we've got what we've got, and
even a second or third choice centre half would be decent.
And I think your bookie will be happy that our bookie, like Paul and Paul and I, but our bookie will be a wee bit nervous, but your bookie will be happy. Aye.
I don't gamble, and you should gamble responsibly. At this point, I will point out we are on all the social media channels. You can follow us at Celtic Down Under on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, because I refuse to call it X, and on YouTube. Please get in touch. Feedback is very much appreciated. Get your thoughts, get them on there. Definitely happy to sort of incorporate them into our future shows. We record on a Monday night Perth time. It gets released on Tuesday night Perth time. So slight delay, but the breaking news this morning when we woke up was that Michael Plucky Beale had been sacked as Rangers manager. Didn't come as too much of a surprise. I thought maybe he might have hung on to for a wee while longer, but he hasn't. He's been replaced by the management powerhouse that is Stephen Davies, who's obviously knee injuries, obviously worse than was let on, and Alex Ray, who apparently was a coach, but is also probably, well, he apparently allegedly is a pundit as well, but he's not a very good one. So they're the interim management team. Richard, I'll throw it at you first. Give you some stats here. 14 matches this season for Michael Beale, 8 wins, 2 draws, 4 losses. I think the key point here is 3 of them are in the league. They're 7 points adrift of Celtic at the moment. Do you think he was hard done by?
So I think that there was a great achievement in beating Betis, because that's great, because that keeps the coefficient up. No enlightened self-interest there at all. And then I took an unnatural interest in watching the second half of Rangers versus Aberdeen yesterday afternoon. Took a wee bit of time out to watch that game. It's interesting. I'll be honest, I think Rangers were a wee bit unlucky because they had a lot of chances and they really didn't finish. They had some decent kind of run-up play, but some, poor heading decisions, blah, blah, blah. And Aberdeen took their chances. I have to say that if the shoe was on the other foot, we wouldn't accept it. I do think that it's probably a wise decision at this stage in the season, because beyond this, they are not going to achieve anything. And I do think that our competitive edge already this season is sharper. So I'm delighted for Celtic. Obviously, it's really sad when somebody loses their job, right? Because you sign up, you bring your family, blah blah blah. But yeah, I can see why the Rangers support were all gone by 70 minutes. Now that game, I watched the end of the second half, went on for 102 minutes. So it was a full 32 minutes where basically their support had deserted them. We would never do that. But I'm happy to see that there is going to be change there shortly, because that leads to a further period of turmoil, which I hope we can exploit.
Paul, have you got any sympathy for Mickey Beale, or was the writing on the wall?
He's an idiot, right? So I've got very little sympathy for him. He's talked utter nonsense since he's been through the door. There's a narrative being driven that he's the new manager, even though he's been around since November. He engineered or helped engineer Gio Van Bronckhorst's demise by going to Rangers pubs, being in the game, chatting to players apparently before he even had the job offer. So you reap what you sow, as far as I'm concerned. He wasn't very good. Biggest disappointment about this is that he didn't keep his job for a bit longer, because whilst Richard's right, there will be some turmoil. This was always coming. The writing's been on the wall for a while. And the longer he limped on, the more opportunity there was for us to increase that gap. There's always a mild nervousness when your opposition changes their manager. Not necessarily for this season, because I think just, well, Tommy's not here, he'd have a fit. But I'm going to say right now, we'll win the league. Calling it after 7 games, we'll win the league. But
are you sure not on the Scottish mainstream media?
but when you change managers, or your opposition change managers, there's always an opportunity, right? So they might get one right. They haven't done for a while, but they might get one right. Muscat seems to be leading the betting. I'm not convinced that he will want an opportunity in Europe. I'm not convinced he'll feel like this is the right opportunity. There's obviously a selling of him being a Rangers man. He was there for a season, right? Not that it should matter, but I think he's a Catholic as well. They'll love that. Another Catholic manager. Do you know what I mean? They've had a few down the years, but the worst element of that support won't be delighted with that as a choice. So I'd be hoping for a McInnes or a Martindale, to be honest. And that's probably I think I've heard they've just spent 4 million to pay out him and his backroom staff on the back of spending a fortune on a bunch of idiots that can't score goals, strikers that can't score goals. I can't imagine there's much left in the coffer. I can feel another share issue coming. So I would imagine they're going to have to probably take a budget option or sort of shit or bust, like, gamble again. But either way, it's been very entertaining, and I'm a bit disappointed the entertainment appears to have sort of come to a grinding halt a bit quicker than we hoped. But yeah, Rangers Twitter is hilarious. Well, Celtic Twitter monitoring Rangers Twitter and follow and those other ridiculous chat rooms. The guys that do the work on Twitter to cobble that all together and collate it, these guys are saints. They deserve all the credit. They bring me, and I'm sure thousands, millions of others of us, tons and tons of entertainment. Long may it continue. So yeah, little sympathy. Yes, he's a human, blah blah blah, but you reap what you sow. So we'll wait and see who comes next. But certainly, I've got no fear from a snooker player and a borderline human. So I don't think those two will be setting anything on fire, except for maybe the Bain in the dressing room, because they've sort of made a terrible error with something or other. Honestly, the comparison of Stephen Davis to the snooker player is a bit of genius from the Celtic support. And I should mention one of my favorite non-Celtic Twitters, Fit by Tweets. He's a little cartoonist dude. I've mentioned him a lot before. He started drawing Stephen Davis as the snooker player, the Nugget. So that is a piece of brilliance. Get yourself on Twitter. Look for Fit by Tweets. He's doing some sterling work as well. But yeah, that was quite a monologue. But that's my view on all of that mess.
His little cartoon of the wee soldier abseiling down with the P45 form for Mickey Beale, that must have had me laughing all day on Sunday before it actually happened. Well, obviously, he got boned this morning, overnight our time, so obviously he was a bit prophetic with that. I would just say that, Michael Beale made a big song and dance about how he signed his players and it was his team. And when you do that, you've kind of got to get it right. And unfortunately, when you're sort of doing a bit of pick and mix and you're getting guys who are not wanted at other clubs, £1 million players, Bosmans, realistically, only a couple of them are probably going to turn out to be decent. Like if you're lucky, because I mean, in that price point, we did some analysis. We were doing some analysis, and Steve on Celtic Down Under will be doing some analysis coming forward about the success rates of signings under various Celtic managers. And we perceived Ange to be all his signings were great, but when we actually sat down and worked it out, it's still very close to 50-50. And then when you're in that low bracket, it's probably even less than that. So, they got rid of Morelos, they got rid of Kent, got rid of Arfield. Sakala, like players that managed to keep them competitive, and they replaced them with Dross. And obviously Ross Wilson had left, so it was Mickey Beale who was responsible, supposedly responsible for all this. So, you can't then turn and start slagging the players off because you're the one that actually brought them in. So, like you say, you reap what you sow, and Ange. You could just tell Ange didn't like the guy at all. Like, you could see he had a respect for Gio van Bronckhorst. So you could see he was quite respectful when in conversation about it. But as soon as Michael Beale came in, his demeanor just changed. And that, for me, was a sign that this guy is an absolute plonker. And, obviously his post-match things are just like, he's on another planet. But like I said, he's got to end up getting what he deserves. And like I said, it's just a shame maybe it didn't sort of drag on and muddle on for a bit longer. But there's rumours going around that Rangers are still paying off Gio van Bronckhorst's contract, and now they're going to have to pay off his contract. He was contracted till 2026. So unless there's an exit clause there that they can get rid of him for less, it seems like they're going to be paying a lot of gardening leave for quite some time. But
yeah,
anyway,
as I say, they figure I think it's $3.5 million for Beale and another $0.5 million for his backroom staff. So, $4 million in Scottish football, even for one of the bigger teams, is a bit of chunk of change. So, And as you know, to the point, they've shelled out a lot of cash on what looks like pretty average players. So I don't really see where, and whoever comes in might not fancy them. Likely not to fancy them. They look bloody awful. So
then you're back to square one. Here's
Pedro.
just a statistic. Yeah. Here's a statistic for you. This will be their 7th manager in 12 years as Sevco or Newco. As the old co, you'd have to go 28 years to get 7 managers. And that's counting Walter Smith twice. So, I mean, they just, in this constant search to try and compete with us, they're just constantly burning through cash and managers. And it's just, like I said, I don't think it's sustainable, but that's their problem. Them and some of their Nazi supporting fans.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another point from the weekend. Just before we move on from this, there's another guy on Twitter that I would sort of like to give a shout out. It doesn't appear to be a Celtic fan, but he's got a thing called, I think, Scotland's Coefficient or Scottish Coefficient, it's called.
Yes.
He's a really good guy. Basically, his main focus is obviously looking at the coefficient and who's contributing points, but he obviously is focused on Scottish football, so he'll talk about the big points of the day. And he made the point, he was making some points around the Rangers management situation, and if they're not careful, they're basically going to become the Borussia Dortmund of Scottish football. Obviously, Bayern have won 11 out of 11, and they're a big club, and they sign good players, and they do, but they can't lay a glove on Bayern Munich. But I think we're very nearly there already, to be honest. And if we add the Champions League money again next season, and we start, obviously we've tied down all these players on long contracts. I don't expect very many of them to see that contract out. A guy like Kyogo might, because he's already 28, coming up 29. So he's, we're probably going to see him see it out. Cal will see it out, obviously, but some of these younger guys will move on, and we'll have big bucks coming in for them when we do, on top of Champions League money and all the rest of it. So, if you're a fan of one of them, well, you've got lots of problems if you're a fan of one of them lot, but you'd also be particularly despondent about that gap widening if you were in any way attached to reality, which most of them aren't.
Richard, any thoughts on any of that before I just quickly pivot to something else?
Yeah, I think we should be worried about this emergent squad, but anyway, we can move on quickly.
The other point we just wanted to touch on was the media blackout. So obviously, box office games this weekend. Celtic coming up trumps in the last 10 minutes of the match to win 2-1 against Motherwell at Fir Park. Aberdeen winning 3-1 at Mordor. None of these games available on the broadcaster Sky. Richard, how do we solve this issue? Like, I mean, we're obviously in Australia and it's slightly different for us, but Celtic TV, the quality of it's not the best. So we didn't have any crowd noise on Saturday night. We could hear the commentators, we couldn't hear any crowd noise. It felt a bit almost harked back to the COVID season where like there was no crowds. It was weird. And then you've likes of Neil Doncaster, who's been in a job for 10 years as CEO, getting away with rubbish TV deals and allowing a weekend of fixtures. And Rangers Aberdeen is usually a feisty tie. Like, you think that would be on TV, and there's no coverage. It's just I look at the AFL here in Australia, and I think, imagine saying to all the punters, "There's no AFL on TV this weekend. You've got to go to the game, otherwise you don't get to see it." I mean, it's just absurd. What are your thoughts?
Or pay pay-per-view. You club pay-per-view for one match, yeah.
That's right. So it's a huge worry, and I think it's a huge worry in terms of the lack of exposure. And I think that the product has clearly suffered on the back of Rangers banning fans at Ibrox. They made the decision about kind of Celtic Rangers. They reduced that as a spectacle. I don't want to lay the blame entirely at their door, but they diminished the product in doing that. Aberdeen, you're right. They are probably the one support in the country who have a feistier reputation with Rangers, or as feisty a reputation with Rangers as Celtic. And there was always going to be, a huge deal if they beat them there. Now, it's lovely. I actually was able to see a wee bit of the Rangers coverage via an opportune channel, should we call it, and was able to hear the kind of Rangers commentary and that sort of that death knell 2-0 Aberdeen, which was really lovely. And it would have been great to be able to see that. My main thrust here, though, is that there's a product. Ange actually grew the product, believe it or not, in Australia, as you know. And I think that we've got an opportunity to expand what's happening with Bain and so on, because Bain are actually available all over. The Scottish FA have made such a terrible, terrible chain of events. Stuart Doncaster. The internet age is here. Why are we not embracing this? Why are we not doing this at home? I'm embarrassed.
The BN game on the weekend was Hearts Ross County for some reason. Ross County Hearts. It was up in Dingwall. It was weird because you think Rangers Aberdeen would be the obvious one, but anyway. Paul, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree with Richard. It's a total shambles for to have signed a contract with a broadcaster that doesn't want to show any matches in a given match week. You couldn't act, like, if Scottish football wasn't as comedic at this type of stuff, you would say you would literally say you're having a laugh. That there's no way that could happen, but somehow it has, particularly with a fixture as big as Rangers Aberdeen. And I took my horn about Aberdeen last week, and I'm going to toot my horn about Aberdeen again this week, because I predicted they'd get a result there, and now they're up to sixth or seventh or something.
2 wins. It's all it takes. It's all it takes.
I said, a couple of wins and they'll be right up the table. That's what I said 2 weeks ago, and there it is. So, it's a total shambles. We're stuck in this contract, I think, till 2029 or something ridiculous.
2029.
It's bad enough it's a bad deal. It's even worse that it's that lengthy time of a bad deal. I can't believe Doncaster's still in a job. It just proves how badly run the game is, and how there's no accountability on failure to do your job. There's a really good. I've mentioned this guy before. A guy called Forest Finishing on Twitter. His handle is @GetInForest. He produces a lot of good material on Celtic stuff. I caught it earlier today. There's a really good thread on this exact topic, the media blackout. It runs to 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 tweets. Worth looking at. And he's basically saying we need to stop comparing ourselves to England and sell the product based on, it shouldn't matter if people in England are going to watch it. We want people in Scotland watching the product, right? If you can't get your own country to watch the product, how are you expecting other parts of the world to want to watch the product? So he's got some really good points, and it's worth a look. So it's Get In Forest, 2 R's, obviously, like Jamesy Forest. But yeah, worth a follow on Twitter, and his thread's decent. But yeah, it's an absolute shambles. I'm sick of thinking about it and speaking about it, because every year they make a bigger arse of it than the next. Every time there's a contract up, they make a bigger arse of it than the last time, and it almost seems implausible that would be the case.
I fully agree with both of you. We'll circle back around to the match of Motherwell versus Celtic, and we, at this point, take the opportunity to name our man of the match. So panel of 3, highest number of votes wins. So Richard, being our guest this week, I will allow you to go first. Who was your man of the match in our 2-1 win?
I'm sorry if this becomes a trope, but Matt O'Reilly.
Paul?
Well, alluded to earlier, and yeah, only one candidate in an otherwise reasonably poor performance. It's Matt O'Reilly.
It's unanimous, Matt O'Reilly. And he might have just dinged him last week for me. So, well done, Matt. 3 from 3, clean sweep. I'm sure Sean would hopefully agree with us, but you never know. Sean, if you're listening, hope you're having a great time in Scotland. You can have this chair back as soon as you get back to Perth. Thank you, Richard and Paul, for joining us. We'll just finish with some final thoughts. I got very much into the Ryder Cup rabbit hole over the weekend, so I got absolutely entranced with it. The crowds were fantastic. Europe got off to flyer 4-0 on the Friday, and then just needed half a point near the end on Sunday, and it dragged out till about 11:30 till they got it, but we got there. And great win. And for a so-called decade of dominance that was coming from the USA, it was good to put them back in their box. And great performances from Victor Holland, Rory McIlroy, And Big John Ram, he sort of just fought and fought and fought. And yeah, really, it was, like I say, very engrossing. And I'm now watching Full Swing, which is the Netflix documentary now. So I'm sort of, I've totally sort of fallen down that rabbit hole. Richard, any final thoughts for this week?
Yeah, I just hope we pump Lazio. That's it, pretty much. Yeah, just really, really excited about Champions League. I think they're just exceptional nights out at Celtic Park. If you're lucky enough to be there, God love you. I hope you have a brilliant time. But yeah, I really hope we pump Lazio.
Paul?
Yeah, I'll do a musical recommendation, and I'll do a quick TV mention as well. So, a WA band from the Wheat Belt originally, so regional WA, which is a bit unusual. A band called Old Mervs. Check them out. They've had a few EPs and singles. The latest single's been out for a month or so. It's called Hey. But yeah, Old Mervs, MERVS. They're starting to get some national tours going. I imagine there'll be an album in the offing in probably the next 12 months. I would think, if not sooner. And then yeah, just a little shout out on a TV recommendation. Sex Education is back on Netflix for its final season. If you like a diversity show, a show that values diversity and manages to balance pathos with extremely crude humor, you can't really go past it. So it's a show that I loved. I'm about halfway through this final season. My wife won't let us binge it, so we're getting it drip fed every few days. So I don't know how it pans out, but it basically the first episode's enough to hook you in. So Sex Education final season, and the whole 4 seasons if you've not watched it previously.
I binged it in a weekend. Very, very good. I think that's might be the last season though, so it's a bit sad.
It is,
anyway, yeah. Well, I think on that note, I think we will we'll call it hits. We're just over an hour, so we've done pretty well there time-wise, guys. Very efficient, very good. Sean and Jared will be happy. And I think that all that's left to say is hail, hail.
Hail, hail.